And, just on that whole idea of enforcing the law, it seems like the Democrats have a real selective enforcement problem here, too, because, they're the first people to regulate our lives, law-abiding citizens' lives, regulate how we use our energy, regulate this, our businesses, and everything like that. The phrase anarcho-tyranny is something that we hear sometimes, and it seems like this is what we saw in California, and this is what's coming to New York, and this is going to be what whoever the Republican nominee in 28 is going to have to run against, because they'll say, don't do this to the rest of America.
Yeah, and I think, California looked to Portland, for example, with the anarcho-tyranny we're seeing there. And Democrats have decided to make that as though that is a peaceful protest. They're trying to turn it into a First Amendment argument. But Americans voted for President Trump for many reasons. But one of the big ones was law and order. Nobody wants to see a repeat of 2020 with the riots, right? The summer of love that we had. And the fact that Democrats are not willing to listen to the entire country, which shifted right in November, and instead try to double down that these are peaceful protests, that we can't enforce the law because they're fighting the good fight. It's going to turn away voters come 2026 and 2028.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And another thing that I think voters are going to get pretty sick of, too, is this government shutdown, which is continuing here. And there was an amazing admission from Democrat House Whip Catherine Clark talking about how struggling families are actually now political leverage in the negotiations. Have a listen to this.
I mean, shutdowns are terrible. And of course, there will be families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously, but it is one of the few leverage times we have.
I mean, talking about beatings will continue until morale improves here. This idea that you just use struggling families to make a political point, this must be backfiring on them, surely.
Well, I think it's easy for her to say that when her paycheck still keeps coming. Notice she hasn't said she's not going to take it, anything like that. Surprisingly, Democrats haven't faced nearly as much pushback as they should. And I think it's part and parcel because the propaganda press is doing their bidding. The Democratic-led media is trying to make this as though it is a Republican shutdown. I don't think voters are necessarily buying into that, especially when you have people like Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, calling out his own party for holding Americans and families hostage. But so the reason that I think it's going to keep going is until there is enough public and media pressure on Democrats to open the government with a clean CR, they're going to dig their heels and they're going to keep using American families as hostages and political pawns, all because they want to give illegal aliens free health care.
And this is just something to bring, our Australian viewers up to speed on. To pass that vote, to pass that continuing resolution to keep the government funded, they need 60 votes, not a majority of 51 to make that happen. So that's why the Democrats can still hold the government to hostage on this here. But finally, before I let you go, we talk a lot about political violence on this show and the threat of it coming particularly from the left. Well, turns out Republican Senator Eric Schmidt has maybe heard this call because he's going to be chairing a hearing next week on this threat. Here's a little bit of what he had to say on the matter.
So we're going to have a hearing on it. We're going to have Michael Knowles come testify, who was a victim of a firebombing himself, of what's really behind all this and what are the strategies moving forward. We need to go at this thing and be aggressive, not just play defense, but play offense, because this is a real threat to our country and the fabric of our constitutional republic.
Brianna, what are we expecting to get out of this? Will we find out that there are big money donors, including some that might be quite familiar to our viewers, behind some of these groups that are funding so much of the mayhem in American streets?
Yeah, I think the purpose of this hearing is going to be to thread that needle, particularly of George Soros, someone who donates millions of dollars to organizations like Indivisible, which was behind the No Kings protest, other organizations that have really propped up these protests that also happen to turn violent. And this is an opportunity right now. Republicans have 1 year, in case we end up losing the House, they have 1 year to get and come to terms with who is funding these protests, right? People show up with the signs. They all look the same. You're telling me 1,000 people got together and made the same signs? Of course not, right? There's someone backing these fundings. If you're backing a peaceful protest, fine, but these never turn out to be peaceful in the most part. And we know that political violence in America is coming from the left to the right. We have to figure out, is that organized? Is this part of a larger plan?
Brianna, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot more to it, and I'm looking forward to finding out what that is. Brianna Lyman, thank you so much for joining me tonight.